Hi everyone, this is MJ and Cassie, and you are going to see another episode of our intimate conversation online explorations. So today we talked about racism, racism and dating, which was very interesting, and I guess we're just going to summarize what we learned from there.
Yeah, so I would like to thank our participant who came with us because that was a subject that was uncomfortable. And I think as a society, we should have conversation about race while you're dating. And we learn a lot of stuff. So we're going to provide a little bit our feedback. So I'm just going to start with my feedback that what did I learn? And I think I kind of got being a little bit hopeful because sometimes I'm a little bit cynical about the world. And what I learned about was really hopeful that people are having that conversation and dating in a group. So we learned a lot about how interracial dating work, the like our experience. I know as per my experience, like I said, I in my 20s, I think a lot of guys that I dated that was white was a little bit fetishism, but I didn't know that word what it was. And also we learned that people right now are having that conversation. They learn about their past experience, that you need to talk about race when you're not in an interracial relationship, that you need to talk about the privilege, and you need to talk about how your society is making you feel. And I think that's what I learned. And I think it's good that people are having that conversation. Even sometimes it's difficult. We need to have that conversation to grow as a society.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I learned a lot of things from the conversation. I definitely, this whole insight that it's kind of interesting because it's something that I covered a little bit because I was also in an interracial relationship, but not as in depth as I could have, especially at the beginning. Because I mean, you don't know, you kind of like, especially when like, it depends on people's background, right? Because my background, I was always surrounded by all the races, and you think that because your friends are all accepting that, extending to family of whoever you're dating should be the same thing, but it's not always the case. Not that I had a bad experience, but you start to understand that their understanding of racism is not quite the same as what it actually is, and the importance of talking about the different issues so they're aware, but also knowing the thing that I thought was very insightful from one of the participants was like, it's not my job, especially nowadays, to teach you about the issues. If you care enough, you're going to start looking whenever there's an issue. You shouldn't expect me to tell you everything about it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point, because then it's not an equal relationship.
Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of agree with that participant I did because I think my relationship right now, the thing I did like about my partner, and I always give the most basic instinct, is the hair of a Black woman. And I remember when we dated, he did his research. He went on, like, he did his research. So he was like, oh, I understand that. And I went to follow, I think it was someone in Twitter. He went to do his research. And for me, that was the first time being in a white and Black woman relationship that I saw someone did his research. And since that day, and I think for the last couple relationship I've been with, I decide that if I would talk to you about race since the beginning to understand if it's more my oppression, that you need to understand the oppression I'm dealing on a daily basis. And I need for you to be the listener and learn about it, but also I don't want to educate it. Like we always say, they have Googles, they have books. We're lucky as a society to have the internet to find information and experience. So I think that's something that I really like about that. And also the other thing that I like about it, some other people explain that they were dating some people, they never talk about race, but they realize maybe that's why the marriage fell out. And they understand about, and they talk about the family issue, because you also have the family of the person you date. Like I said, and I like that because that's resonated with a lot of our participants. I don't want to be your dirty secret. For me, if your family cannot accept the fact I'm a Black woman, because that's what you see and that's what you get with me, I don't want to date you. I don't want to be your family secret. But I like the fact that people realize that and question them about it and say, next time, if I'm going to be in a relationship, let's talk about it. Even if it's uncomfortable, we need to talk about it.
There's a lot of cool things. Another thing that I really resonated with, because I that's something that I look as well. This whole idea of like whoever you're thinking about dating or is dating, if they don't have any friends in other races than their own, it's a red flag, especially living in Toronto. And it's kind of interesting because intuitively, especially now that I'm out of a relationship, because before I wasn't looking, now I'm looking. And you know, it's easy, you see on Facebook, whatever, like if all our friends, and no matter what race, are the same, it's not a good, and it's not a good thing. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and also I think our background, MJ, we went to the same school but in a different period of time, and I think that's cool. We're a little bit utopic about the world because in the school we had different people from different backgrounds, different colors, but my circle of friends was always been from different cultures. So sometimes I think I expected that people have the same group of friends until when I started dating them, I was like, okay, you're just really hanging out with only white Irish.
Yeah.
It's like all your friends and how you talk with your friends. If your friend is saying a comment that is not okay, like, are you going to defend me? Are you going to try to let it go? Or so, but I do agree with that looking at people's surrounding explain a lot with who you surrender with and who you are, who is your value and who you're able to accept.
Yeah. That's very, very, very telling. And again, I agree with what you said, this whole idea of like, because of the fact that we were brought up in a multicultural setting, because like not only the school, but for me also, my parents and their friends were from different nationalities, different religion, even different religion, actually.
Yeah.
That was never a big deal. So you expect that. And it's kind of funny because I remember like from high school to CJEP, I went to Brebeuf, there's a lot of segregation, but I somehow figured out a way to create the UN. We called ourselves the UN because we had somebody from every race in our group. Like that's always been the same thing. And Concordia, when I went to university, same thing. My friends from different race. So it's kind of like, isn't that what everybody's doing? And you start looking like, oh shit.
See, for me, it's a bit different, my experience, because I went to Grasset. And that's when I kind of found out, inconsciously, I think I found out was the word white privilege. Without, in our time, we didn't have a vocabulary. We're not woke like the society right now. They're more educated in my time. And I remember I was one of the black spot in that school. And I still remember one of the interactions someone told me, he's like, oh, I never met a black woman. You must be so sexy and so like the fetish, the stereotype of a black woman that we love sex, that we are only want that. And I was so in shock. And for me, that was a culture shock because I was not expected, because in high school, I had friends from Iran, I had friends from Greece, I had like friends from Haiti. I have one of my good best friend was Lebanese at that time. And other one of my friend was Vietnamese. So my surrounding was never with like one particular race. And I think that's why I changed school a little bit after that, because I didn't like that experience, because I felt that I was out of place. I was not happy in that time because it was not just the world I was surrounding. But also around my work job, it was always like, I remember when I work in an insurance company in Montreal, one of my friend was a woman with a hijab, and I spoke to her. And for me, it was interesting to understand why you're different and what could I learn. Yeah. But also I said, when you're dating, you need to see what the person is surrender. Even with my friends in Toronto, if I look at all my friends, they're all from different backgrounds. They're all different experience that I have. But if I notice that I'm dating someone that only have the same type of friend, only have the same type of race friend, and they don't want to grow, for me, it's a black sign for like, you will not understand me. You're not really open to the world. And like I said, you have to have conversation about race if you're in an interracial relationship. It may be uncomfortable, but you need to have that conversation.
It's very interesting. And this whole, the first question that we had, defining what is racism and what is colorism. And it's interesting. And it's an important thing to talk about. Do we all have the same understanding of what racism is and
yes.
what colorism is? Because not everybody, depending on our background, like obviously people of color will have a very different, not all the time, but most of the time, a very different perspective of what racism is compared to people that are white, essentially. There's no other ways to say it because it's always come back to white and not. It's just the reality.
And also it's and what I heard is like a lot of people understand the past history of colonialism and what impact it made to country with the South Asian country, island country, African country, how the European beauty standard influenced a lot of the colonialism. And I thought that was interesting. If the person was white or brown or black, because we have everyone like almost like that group. And it was interesting that all of them, and it's also interesting that they question also the family, because sometimes it could be a member of your family that do not accept. Like I said, I was kind of lucky. My parents always tell me, bring someone who respects you, along they respect who you are, along they like for who you are, they're open regarding that. But I thought it was very interesting that someone could say that my dad did a comment I didn't like. My sister dealt with that and I didn't like that comment. Even you were talking about your experience, you were saying I got comments I didn't enjoy that I took a look. And I think that was a good grown-up discussion. And I wish society had that conversation. And if you, like I said, you love somebody for who they are, but love is good, love is beautiful, but sometimes you need to have that uncomfortable conversation to understand how that person feels, understand your white privilege also. And yeah, so I thought it was a good conversation.
This whole idea of like, understand what does it mean when you really say that you love somebody completely, or it's just convenient for you, or it's just cool. Because like somebody pointed out something that was very true. You can be racist and still date somebody that you're racist against. That happens all the time, either through fetishization or because it's cool. Because if you date somebody from a different race, you're going to be perceived as cool. But when problems arise, you're not going to do anything. I remember that video that I saw of this Black guy and this white woman that are obviously going out together. And I think the whole thing about the police officer harassing the Black guy outside of the car. And instead of her doing something about it, she's inside a car. It's like, okay, no, I'm just filming. It's like, well, do you really love the person, or it's just convenient until something happens? And as a couple, you're supposed to be able to help and support. You know that there's an issue with Black men and police officers, and you just want to be like, it's okay, I'm just filming, knowing full well that as a white woman, you can just go and talk to them and it'll be like, okay, ma'am, that's fine, like whatever type thing. So is it really love, or?
And also, even being an interracial couple, sometimes you could date someone from another race. Just because you date somebody of that race doesn't mean it's okay to say the N-word, to say the derogative word. And just because you're dating a Black woman doesn't mean you're not racist, that you should not question. And it doesn't give you a pass for racism. I know sometimes it happens, like, and I know Asian women, they're considered a lot of the stereotype. They think they're like, oh, they're so sweet and they say yes to everything. I have a lot of Asian women that have characters. They will defend themselves. They will tell you straight up what's going on. But it's all the stereotype in society that we need to question to understand where it came from. But also we need to understand the people who's being oppressed when you're in a relationship. And I always say, let them listen. You have to listen. If you don't listen to their experience, how are you gonna understand to change your behavior?
Yeah, definitely. And another thing that was very interesting to point out, that's why like it's very important to talk about these things, because we talk about this whole idea of like idealization, European standard and stuff like that. But it also can make a white woman, for example, feel uncomfortable because there's this weird idealization and fetishization in a sense of like non-white men that are going to see this white woman as like the apex of like freaking everything. And she might be like, so you like me for me, or you like me just because I'm white? That's a problem too. That's also racism that we don't talk about.
But also it's again about European colonization. Remember when yesterday I sent you a message on WhatsApp regarding the newsletter? They have studies saying that the two people who get less look on dating website are Asian men and Black women, are the two lowest people will click on. And the reason for Asian men, there's a stereotype in TV saying that Asian men are like not sexually attractive, and that's not true. I dated some Asian men. They're every race to have someone attractive, and I dated some Asian men that was not the stereotype that TV perspective. And for Black women, if you're having like, I still remember the first time I went in a speed dating, and it's when I was talking to my best friend, I felt not pretty because no one was looking at me. And was one of my best friends, she told me like, no, because as per the standard in dating advice and website, Black women are look less because they're not as per the European standards. So I think it's all this question of like how society make us having that European privilege with colonialism, is like all those type of history impact that unconsciously. And I think one of the participants say, our dating world reflect our society.
Yeah.
Our dating world reflect our society. And I think that's unconsciously you are programmed what society lets you think what is pretty, what is considered not pretty. I still remember guys I dated, They prefer me when I have my weave with long weave straight, because that was more European standard. And if I have my afro, they did not like that. So for me, that was something I kind of realized that a little bit. And remember one of my ex-boyfriend mother, and her mother, his mother, who told me that she told the word in French, que j'en ai de négritude, that for her, my nose was too black. It was not like European standard. And for me, it was just like, okay. And looking back now, I would not date that person, because I remember that that was a conversation that was starting. And I think that relationship start fading down regarding when you're meeting the person family. And right now, the relationship I am right now, I remember last year we had a conversation before I met his parents. I told him, is your dad is okay for you to date a Black woman?
Yeah.
And I'm like, if your dad is not okay for me to be Black, hey, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not going to change my future. Yeah. It's who I define myself. And I'm proud of being a Black woman. That's who I am. And he said, yeah, I talk about and the next week he had a conversation with his dad and his stepmom, and saying like, he sent me pictures. And to be honest, it was easier when I met them than by past experience when I did not talk. And you're meeting the parents family, and they're like, you get that shock expression on your face and their face. So for me now, it's just like,
I know they have to. Like
you need to talk about it, and you need to understand what is the family is. What's your family? Are you able to defend me with your family? Are you able to accept me with your family? And I think that's something people need to realize what it is. And also, like I said, the hardest thing dating, being in a, like in my experience, is like, I dated brown, Asian, South Asian. Like, I think the other hardest experience for me to date like an interracial, it was, like I said, the privilege on a daily basis. It's just like that little racism action that you know they're being racist, but you cannot prove it they're being racist. And it's seeing your partner understand, like sometimes they don't understand, and sometimes when you had that conversation with them, they're like, oh, it's all in your head. So for me now, it's red flag when you're saying that word, it's all in your head. And I'm like, no, you need to understand, I got followed at the Shoppers. I just came in, that security guard followed me everywhere. And you need to understand why I'm pissed about it. You need to understand my oppression, because they did not follow you. They did not. So I think it's something important to talk, even if it's uncomfortable. And I think that's a part of being conscious. You will have conversation that is uncomfortable, but you need to grow in that conversation. And like we said, I always say, I'm not there to educate you, but I'm there to explain you my experience, because I'm in a relationship with you. You love me for who I am. That's a part of who I am in a daily basis.
But something that I thought was very interesting as well is this whole idea of like the features. You call it like a phenotype. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting that people don't think about that as racism, but it is, like, because certain races have different features, and if you don't have, or you have certain features that's considered more European, then you're considered to be more beautiful. And this whole idea, and it's like the whole idea of, like, when I was giving the example of the eyelids of Asian people, like, I didn't even know that was an issue, but that's an issue because it's, again, to imitate the European standards of beauty. And I think an interesting thing to look into is where does that come from, and how deep inside our society has this been brainwashed into us since we were kids? This whole idea of like that. Well, first of all, who do we see on TV or in ads all the time? We're giving the example of Brazil. You think about a Brazilian woman, you think about a blonde-ish type girl with long hair, with like tan skin. You go to Brazil, a good portion of these women actually have my skin color, and sometimes even darker, but they're never portrayed as Brazilian. You look at Indian women, like you think about an Indian woman, like a little bit darkish skin, like fair skin, a little bit darker with dark, long, silky hair. That's pretty much it. You go to India, some people have their skin darker than me, and there's a lot of them. So how come you don't see? And even in, I think in Thailand, there's people that are my skin color with curly hair like you right now.
Yeah.
You never show them. So when you think about these things, like, why are they always hidden? Like, what's the agenda? Where does that come from?
Colonialism. And it's all about colonialism. But like you said, like people, I was in shock. I think it was a couple of years when I was reading about Brazil. And Brazil is the country in the world that have the most Black people is in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And they have different, like, and I think it's all this, that's why I think diversity is very important in TV. is important. As someone who grew up in the 80s and the 90s as a kid, I didn't see a lot of people look like me. To be honest, I saw one person who looked technically who was like the paper shade of the who was on TV. I never saw someone look at me on TV, and I was kind of lucky because I have parents that like we're all different shade of black. And I remember a conversation I had with my mom, and my mom was like, we're all black. It's like, I don't care, your sister's not gonna have privilege because she have lighter skin. At the end of the day, we're all black. That's what makes us who we are. But I think it's something is beautiful. Like a part of me is kind of happy how society is growing up. You're finding more books for black kids represent. You find book about Asian kid, and you could get educated about it. But I always say diversity is something important. What we see in ads, what we see is that's why society see. If we cannot see it, how are you gonna understand it, and how you could accept it? Like for me, you're a beautiful woman. Like I always give you compliment. Each time I see you, I always think you're beautiful, you're smart, you're beautiful. But for me, it's all about like what society will perceive us and what you should do to change and how to have uncomfortable conversation. And I know this week I had a uncomfortable conversation with one of my friends that I told her straight up, I'm not there to educate you about race. You want to learn about race? Read it. I could explain you my experience as a black woman, but you need to let me express, because if you're cutting me out, you're not letting me express. You're doing the oppressor job. So even you could be woke, you could be that, but you need to listen. And that's what I see. And I think that's why it's important to have that conversation. If you want to work and succeed in an interracial relationship, you need to talk about race. You need to talk about how that is affecting me as a person. How are you going to do what your parents tell me? That I remember when I was with that person in France, and I still remember his grandma told me straight up, oh, but your parents are educated for a black person. And I told her, like, how many black people you know? How many black people who could do your stereotype? But I told him, you cannot let your grandma talk to me like that. You have the job to put your family in your place, because that's not going to help us. If we decide to have kids together, how it's going to be. And I think a part of that relationship did not work. And if I think about that person right now, I do think he had a fetish about black women, but I was not aware because I was in my 20s, because that person only dated black women, like only black women. And it was not like because he was attracted to who we are, but he had that little fetish about it. And that's something now in my 30s, you learn from your past experience. I look at that. I was like, okay, they have fetishism.
Yeah.
They have who you are. Do you like me as a human being, or do you like me because it's cool to date a black woman today? Hey, it's chill. You need to understand what is that questions. And I think what I like about it today, people were able to provide definition about racism, colorism, and fetishism. Yeah. So at least I know, like I said, it kind of gives me a little hope, because I'm pretty cynical sometimes about this planet Earth. And for me is a part of being conscious to talk about conversation that is uncomfortable, to talk about your past experience, to talk about what did you do as a person, like with your privilege, and is to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, it's important to talk about it. It's important to learn from other people's experience, because everybody experiences it one way or another. Even the experience of not getting involved actually is something that needs to be talked about, because there's a fear or whatever type thing. Those are all important things to talk about. One thing that I like a lot about how things are evolving, that's one of the reasons why I love Netflix more than any other like movie producing thing. Because I remember before I still have iTunes, I remember looking at the movie selection. I like romantic movies. It's always the same people. It's always the same look. And then you look at Netflix and like the main character, oh my gosh, the main character is an Asian woman. The main character is a black woman. The main character is an Indian woman. Like I get to finally see other perspective. Like it's like how many, no offense, but how many white women, blonde or dark hair, have to be the main character of a romantic movie?
And also the reason why Netflix is open, that they open diversity and inclusion and talk. And if I'm not too sure, but we could Google it later on. And I think it's a black woman who's in charge of the creative part of Netflix. And you see the difference, because you have like I grew up with a guy friend who's Vietnamese. He's super good looking. And like I said, every race have the beauty, every culture have imbecile. That's something humanity it is. Like stupidity is in all race, beauty is in everywhere. So that, but I thought it was really good. It was a movie. It was about an Asian woman and an Asian guy, and they know each other since they were a kid, and they were both the lead character. And for Asian women, it's rare to show a love in between and being them a lead character. So, and that I found that was interesting. I was like, if I was Asian descendant, I would be like, okay, that's more like my life. Also, Netflix, I think they had a lot of selection of Nigerian movies right now, and they talk about Black love, not with a stereotype that I'm the angry Black woman who need to be tamed and to need to be saved because I got so much hurt with my past experience. Yes, being Black woman is hard, but I do have an excellent experience of being who I am. I do have positivity in this day. And so I think they had another movie. The lead character was the girl from Insecurity, and it was a brown guy from, what was this? He's very funny. Yeah, and they were both lead character, and I dated brown guys. So for me, it was just like, hey, at the end, I'm watching two relationship that society do not represent a lot, that date together. So that's why I said diversity and inclusivity is so important in the screen, because that's what people watch. That's what people understand. If you understand it, it's okay for you to sing. But I think society still have a lot of work to do. But and for us to work about it, we need to have that uncomfortable conversation.
And also point out like the issues with even movie, because I remember watching this, like, okay, I watch romantic movie, it's a release, they're not smart, whatever, not always smart. And I remember watching this one, I think it was called Christmas Drop, and it's about like this military guy who goes to an island. I think it's in Hawaii or something like that. So it's an interracial couple. I think she's Hawaiian and the guy is American. But then, it's kind of okay, cute romantic movie, it's an American movie. But then I'm like, really? The savior again? Like, there's this whole idea, like, and that's where they do the brainwashing. This whole idea that he's there to save the people from the island who can't fend for themselves, like that. Those are all and that's where you get to idealize a certain race and like victimize or fetishize the other one that's being perpetuated. So it's important to talk about it in general and to also see where these ideas come from. They come from most of the time the media. So the more we talk about it, I think the more people are going to be aware, and the more people are going to start looking outside of like North America, European standards of like what love should look like. Because I remember seeing a video from it's a guru. I forget the name of some Indian guru, and he was talking about
guru. That's the only Indian guru I
remember. But he was talking about sex, right? But it was very interesting because he was like, this whole idea of the missionary position did not exist in India. He's like, the missionary position came about with the European Catholic, and that's what they were doing. And he said, in their view, it was so funny, but it was like, he's like, women should be on top. Women are delicate. You can't have a giant, big monster doing push-up over something that's very delicate. It's supposed to be the opposite. I'm like,
and talking about, but I think I talked to you about that show on Netflix is with the lady from CNN. Like I said, I'm really bad with names. It's with the lady of CNN, and it was Sex Around the World. And they were talking about how sex was really free, and it was something that was embracing. And that was the impact of colonialism that bring a little bit, being a little bit control about sex, that sex was not a bad thing. A lot of those countries, I think women was getting educated, taking powerful of the body, and that's a part of colorism also regarding that. So it's like, that's why I said, like, we need to have conversation. It's like, if it is uncomfortable, but I would say if something is uncomfortable, you need to grow about it. If you're comfortable about it, that's me okay. But if you're uncomfortable, ask yourself, why I'm comfortable having that conversation? Why is that reason I'm uncomfortable? How could I understand why I'm uncomfortable, and what could I learn about it? But like I said, like, I still remember I think Oprah have a show called Black Love. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was talking about couple who's in love with each other. And for me, that looked like my parents. I was like, my parents love each other. They work hard for stuff in life, but that was more what I surrender. And I remember as a kid, that's why I didn't like fairy tale. I was like, they're all white blonde hair. Like, they don't look like me. why I'm not going to guess a Prince Charming because of that. So I was never interested in those type of storyline. And I think the reason why I end up loving comic books, especially X-Men, because I had someone who looked like me.
Yeah.
It was Storm. That's why I was like, oh, she's cool. She could control the weather. I felt that someone looked like me. It was not like a stereotype of something else. It was just, she looked like me. That's why I said representation is really important to have it, because sometimes people are not aware. They have Black people everywhere on this planet Earth. We're everywhere. And it's so in shock when I talk, like in Iran, they have a section in Iran, there's only black people who's there. In India, they have Black people. It's there, but also it's like how to decolonize your mind about the stereotype that was imposed about the society, and ask yourself, like I said, if you're uncomfortable with that conversation and you're from a privileged place, ask yourself why I'm uncomfortable, why this conversation is bugging me, why I feel attacked. What do you feel attacked about it? So that's why I said, and by experience, I don't know what will happen with my relationship right now, but I know something on a daily basis from the last 2 past relationship, talking about race in an interracial relationship is the most important for me, is to know that you understand who I am, my race and my color skin and my sex is the definition of who I am, who you see. So if you cannot understand and have uncomfortable conversation about it, you cannot be with me, because I'm not going to change.
And also another thing that I find is really important when doing research, to be able to understand the history behind. It's very important to look outside the conventional way, because a lot of times people look through history, but it's like, listen, history that you have is history that was written and curated by the bullies, not the people who were persecuted. So you're only getting, like, you imagine you go to school and there's a bully that like keeps beating up a bunch of the people, and then they write the story about what happened. You're not getting the whole story. So you have to look outside of the conventional way of learning about it, and a lot of people don't like think about it that way, to really understand what's going on and to really solve problems.
And also, I know, like, I am kind of lucky because my best friend does study that, so we have a lot of conversation. And she told me something about books about racism and all this stuff. She's like, what I would suggest you is to read a book written by a Black woman who understands the oppression, because you could feel it. And right now in our DNA, we have so much different way of thinking, different type of books. History is starting to be told, but the good history, I mean the real history, like think about the Native. When I was in Montreal school, they did not tell me that it was a genocide that happened in America. They just told me the Native, like they gave me a stereotyped storyline of the Native. And I remember I was having a conversation with my dad, who saw my history book. And he was like, that's not true. They got a genocide. The problem they have, they put them in an institution school. That was the first time I heard about that and the experience about it. So I think more we learn what is the history from both sides, is important that you understand. Like example for me, like I'm from Haiti, but how many times I tell people that are surprised when I tell Haiti is the first Black country to get the independence in this planet Earth, the first colored country was considered independent, and Haiti's still paying the price with sanction and all this stuff. A lot of people look at me like it's not true. I was like, well, I know my history because I got parents who told me my history, who told me my history. So I think that's why it's important to have conversation and like challenge your belief. But like, I will just want to insist, if you feel uncomfortable with that conversation, you still ask yourself why you're feeling comfortable about it, and try to learn about it and grow. But you need to ask yourself why I'm feeling comfortable having that conversation.
Or avoiding. It's kind of because
avoiding too. Yeah.
It's not my problem. No, it's your problem, because everybody's on this earth are diverse. So when you avoid, it's because it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Something to look into. No, it was very, very insightful. And we only got to do 2 questions. We had like 10 people, 11 people, I forget. But it was a very good conversation. Probably going to do it again. Continue the other.
Yes. And we will do part 2 soon. And I think MG we will put the 2 questions we asked under the YouTube channel link.
Yeah, we'll put
Yeah, so to see what we were discussing. If you guys have any feedback, any question, any subject, how to join intimate conversation, all our link will be under the video. If you want to press a like, press a like. And if you want to talk about any conversation, it's welcome. Along that your conscience, you're ready to open in vulnerability and you're ready to grow, you're welcome to our group.
Yeah. So, and if you also want to subscribe. If you want to join our conversations are every Saturday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's open to everybody who's conscious. We got people from we got somebody from the UK that's part of the group right now. Sometimes some from the US. Actually, there's two. At least one is from the US.
Is one from the US, and usually we have some people from France.
Oh, yeah.
We got one person in Turkish, so it is open to the world. And just let us know.
Seriously,
yes,
we actually have different parts of the world, especially when we talk about things like that, because different cultures, different countries, they experience things like racism or anything else for a matter of fact differently. So when you start dating people from different cultures, different religion, different country, different race, to be able to have all these people coming from different countries giving their input, I think is very valuable for everybody.
Yeah. So like me and MJ like to say, thank you to share your vulnerability, be open, be uncomfortable. That's the way we grow. And like I said, follow us. I hope you guys enjoyed that exploration with MJ and Cassie. So hopefully see you guys soon and enjoy your week.
Bye.
Bye.